These are our parakeets that make the rest of us feel like the cold man. To know that Walt and George and Charles are out being the face of our Sunday school class, I guess that's all right, George. Thank you all for coming this morning. I don't know if you all got rain or not, but boy, we did at where we live, and it's the first rain we've had in 2 or 3 weeks. Boy, it was wonderful. We just opened the windows and listened to it rain. We're glad that we have visitors with us today, and we're pleased that you all are here. We're glad you all came with Bob. He needs somebody to help build up his reputation a little bit. Congratulations on your Medal of Honor dinner. That's going to be a grand deal. I've watched that Medal of Honor Museum from its inception, and what you've done with it's really amazing. So we're proud about that. Tell Fran we miss her. Don't you miss Fran when she's not here? And we have others that are sick. I think our class kind of took care of the hospital list this week. So we'll remember these friends in our prayers. And Joan, we're glad you're here today. You know, we believe that there are certain kinds of emotions that separate us from animals, from brutes. We may not call them emotions, we may call them feelings that separate us from the animals. I would almost rather call them our capacity for spiritual experiences. And by spiritual, I mean those deep kind of dynamics of our lives that we're never able to explain, but become a part of our realities in powerful ways. And so we do have distinct kind of emotions and feelings and spiritual experiences. One of those is the feeling of being proud. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever think that you have very, very special moments when you feel proud about something? And that more than likely, there's no other creature on the face of this earth that's put together in a way like we are that will allow them to feel what we feel when we say we're proud about something. I think that that's a good way to begin our morning devotions or our reflective devotions or our encounters with God, to thank God for all the things that we have the opportunity to feel proud about. I have a little grandson, Charlie, who started Baylor last week, and he was selected by his classmates to carry the banner for his class. And so we have pictures of Charlie with the Baylor class of 2025. But that's only 6 years away. I hope we all make it to 2025. We'll go to Charlie's graduation. That'd be a good deal. I was also very proud of May. May started upper school, his sister. I asked May if she gave Charlie any advice about his starting school. And immediately May responded that she had given him advice to not dare do anything that would embarrass her. There's a direct line of the fall of the apple from my wife to Philip, our son, to May. So I'm proud that she's got that kind of backbone and approach to life. I was proud of my daughter this week. She is starting to teach her son Bradford about religious things. And she has really got it right, because she's decided that there's plenty of time for him to learn about Protestants and Catholics, and there's plenty of time for him to learn about Buddhists and Muslims and Jews and Christians, and there's plenty of time for him to learn about Calvin and Wesley and all of those kinds of people. She said she's trying to focus all of her teaching attention and all of his listening attention on Jesus. If she can just teach him a few things about Jesus and let that become part of the role model of his value system, maybe that's the thing that she needs to do. I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. I think that too often we get going down rabbit trails of differences that people have between each other in their faith and their relationship to God and on and on and on. Sometimes I can get very vicious even, very mean-spirited even, which is ironic if it's religion or ought to be. And so if we could just kind of teach about Jesus and get people to let Jesus become a role model for their values, then I think that's about maybe the best that we can possibly do. And so that's what my daughter's doing with her little boy. Bradford takes everything in. And so a few days after their first lesson, he came into the room where she was by herself, and he said, "Mom." And you can tell when Bradford says "Mom" that he's really processed something out to some kind of conclusion. And she said, "Yes, Bradford." And he said, "Mom, did you know that Jesus had a nickname?" Meredith says, "No, I didn't." Said, "Yes, he did." Said, "All of his friends called him Jeez. And I'm going to start calling him Jeez because I think he's my friend too." Pretty good. So you've come to Sunday school today. You've come looking for something new to learn about God and Jesus. And so now you learn that Jesus has a nickname, Jeez. That wasn't Bradford's best trick of the week, though. His first grade teacher is giving them words that they are to put into sentences. And so she had given a list of words, and Meredith let us look at them. And one of those words was RIP, R-I-P. And one of those words was pin, P-I-N. Now that could be a challenge to some of us at our progressive ages. But think about creating two sentences that have some kind of relationship to each other that feature those two words. Here was his first sentence. Give me a safety. He did misspell safety. Pen. His second sentence. I have a rip. I thought that's pretty good. He put together pen and put together rip and got give me a safety pin. I have a rip. But that wasn't exactly how he said it. The way he exactly said it in his little homework assignment was, give me a safety pin, bro. I have a rip. So what is our world coming to? Our grandchildren are calling Jesus Jeez and have figured out how to use the word bro in a sentence. But I'm kind of proud about that. I'm not sure about my Tennessee orange. I hope I'll have something to be proud about. This is my muted Tennessee tie. It's kind of Billy and Jim, my muted hopes for the year. Boy, you can hardly see the T. If we do well after the first 3 games, I've got bolder ties that I can to show that I am. But let me tell you what I'm really proud about this morning. And I want to talk to you about it. And I want you to share something with it because it's United Methodist at the end of the day. And as I talk about this, I'm going to take you through that little ascending pyramid that I've explained about 40 million times and I'm sure you memorized. At the bottom of the pyramid are things that are conceptual, that are mental. I call that systemic. In the middle of the pyramid are things that actually have real life dynamics to them. I call that extrinsic. At the top of the pyramid are realities that are unique. And in their being unique, they transcend just rational thinking or they transcend just real life experiences that we might be able to have. All right, first of all, I want us to talk about a college or a university. The moment I say those 2 words, you know in your minds exactly what I'm talking about. That's conceptual. That's systemic. I'll extend that just a little bit. I want to talk about Tennessee Wesleyan, where I'm proud to be on the board and where I think, and a guy named Harley Knowles, we have one of the best presidents in the whole history of that college that's taking it to new places. And so you see, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. You were asked to pass a test on what is Tennessee Wesleyan, you know exactly what it is. So we've got that in our heads. That's systemic. I had an opportunity to be at a board meeting not long ago, and so Wesleyan began to talk about some things. They began to talk about a new building that they have that's been largely provided by a judge, farmer, landowner in Charleston, Tennessee, that's one of the most beautiful new buildings on that campus. They began to talk about their enrollment, and they began to talk about how their enrollment, which last year was about 1,000, this year is probably going to hit 1,200. That's a really marvelous thing for a college. Especially today, especially when so much education in the first two levels in states like ours is free, and ought to be, but that creates a competitive element when it comes to tuition and things like that. And then they begin to talk about a whole list of new programs that they have and things that they're doing. And so things like buildings, things like enrollment numbers, things like finances that are going pretty well, things like programs that they're creating, things like new faculty members, those are all in that middle part of the pyramid. Those are all kind of extrinsic day-to-day realities that you could talk about in relationship to almost any college. But you know what they took up most of their time talking about in that board meeting? It wasn't new buildings. It wasn't enrollment. It wasn't finances. It was what they were doing in relationship to Hiwassee College that many of you have a relationship with and that many of you have helped immensely. And they talked about how a group of Hiwassee students had kind of been left holding the bag. They were halfway through a program that isn't easily replicated anywhere else in this state because of its cost. And that halfway through that program was going to get them nowhere in their professions and nowhere in their lives. And they talked about how Wesleyan quickly moved across the summer to make sure that they could bring that program under the umbrella of Tennessee Wesleyan and bring those kids in and give those kids an opportunity to finish something that they'd started in their lives that would make an awfully lot of difference to their lives. Then they talked a little bit more. They talked about how those kids and about 30 or 40 other Hiwassee students that had chosen to come to Wesleyan could feel like that they were just being picked up because their school hadn't done real well, or they could just be made to feel like red-headed stepchildren. That was my language, not Harvey Knowles. I'm not sure he'd know what red-headed stepchildren mean. But he said that the first thing they did when the school year opened a week or so ago was they brought all of those kids from Hiwassee in and they pitched a party for them. And they fed them really well. And they got up and explained to them that they were now part of the Wesleyan family and that they were going to be treated as family and that they were happy as they could be that they were on that campus and would help them to be successful in any way that they could. I'm proud of that. I think that's unique. I think that raises the bar all the way to the tip of the pyramid. I think that's intrinsic in its value, in its worth. And so I came away feeling proud of a college that's got new buildings and programs and lots of new students, but proud because of what they were doing with these kids that suddenly were kind of being left out. There was a second thing that they talked about at our board meeting that I want you to be aware of. They talked about their baseball team. Now again, I'm at the bottom of the pyramid, and every one of us in here know what a baseball team is. And if we went to a college campus and we began to walk around and we saw a soccer match going on, we'd know that wasn't baseball. If we saw a tennis match going on, we'd know that wasn't baseball. If we saw a football game going on, we'd know that wasn't baseball. Aren't we smart? Conceptually. Then they began to talk about that baseball team's record. And in this past season, they won about 56 or 57 ball games. They talked about how that baseball team had one boy signed right at the end of his senior year by the St. Louis Cardinals, and two other boys that had been signed off that team to Major League open draft contracts. They talked about going to Spokane, Washington to the World Series for the NAIA, which is their division that they play in. And they talked about winning that World Series. Second time they've done that. Not many schools have ever done it twice. That's all extrinsic though. That's all the middle of the pyramid. That's always that's all numbers that relate to records, and that's all numbers that relate to championships, and that's all numbers relating to people out of a little school up in Athens that are going into professional baseball because of their program. But then they talked about something that brought tears to everyone's eyes in the room if they could shed tears. They talked about a little boy in Athens who's about 5 or 6 years old who is probably dying of cancer. They talked about a little boy that is now on his 3rd trip to St. Jude's to try to save his life, and they are at least prolonging it. And they talked about a coach of a baseball team that has been number 5 to number 10 all across his last season with lots of things weighing on his mind, who had a neighbor who began to talk to him about this little boy, not asking for anything, just telling a story. And the coach at his own initiative called the little boy's dad and said, "Would you like to bring your little boy to one of our practices?" And they did. And the little boy was kind of sickly, and the little boy was kind of shy, and so the little boy didn't have much to say, and it all went away with the coach thinking they had done the right thing. The players seemed to respond to the little kid really well. About a week passed, and the father called and said, "Our little boy wants to come back to a practice." To make a long story short, the little boy stopped missing practices. The little boy started being taken to all the ball games. The little boy became almost the team mascot. The players fell in love with the little boy. And when they went to Spokane to the World Series, the greatest concern of the college and the community was that little boy and his dad get to go with him. And Wayne Tipp's wife's son, who's named Alan Carter, who lives in Athens, made it possible economically for that little boy to go up there. And that coach with tears said that little boy ended up signing more autographs than any player on that team. They gave that child who's probably dying something special that he would never forget in his life. And that's what they talked about. And that's what they were thrilled about. And I am proud about that. That my college can win baseball games, but that they could take care of a little child that probably nobody would much think about helping in a way that they help. And you see, that raises it to the top of the pyramid. That raises it to the intrinsic. And I am proud of my college. It's a Methodist college. It's a United Methodist school. I think John Wesley would be proud of what that team did. The coach, you understand coach, is a baseball coach. He was named National Champion Baseball Coach of the Year. But then, what he came and talked to us about, again through tears, big old rough, strong-looking man, the greatest award that he felt that he'd ever got in his life, he was named Character Coach of the Year. That raises it to a whole different level. And I'm so proud to be a United Methodist and to think about this being a school that represents something of what our faith is about. Well, I need to change tune just a little bit because I've about worn out that word proud. And in the way that our culture normally talks about it, in the way that we've come to think about it, pride is not a virtue. Being proud is kind of negative sometimes. We even have that saying, pride goes before the fall. So maybe we ought to be careful with the word proud. And the Bible is. The Bible generally looks at pride as something that's negative. But the Bible writers were smart enough to know there's another side to that coin that could be altogether positive, the kind of proud that we've been talking about. And so guess what? The Bible's got a special word for that. You already know it. It's the expression well pleased. So well pleased in the Bible is positive pride, that we can be proud about something and that be a good thing. And so, for example, in the Old Testament, God is well pleased with Solomon, because when Solomon starts asking for God's help, he asks for wisdom. God was well pleased. He's proud of Solomon. The Bible tells us that in the first part of the Gospel of Mark that Herod the king is well pleased by the dancing of a woman named Salome, and told her to give her anything she wanted. She didn't ask for wisdom. She asked for John the Baptist's head on a silver platter. Remember that? But he was well pleased. What you're well pleased in can tell you a lot about somebody. Paul writes in the book of Corinthians that it had made God well pleased to have preaching. Paul was a preacher. I guess he needed to say that by the foolishness of preaching that people's lives could be transformed. And Paul thought God was well pleased with that. And of course, what every one of you all must be thinking is that at the baptism of Jesus, that the Spirit of God descending in the form of a dove says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." God was proud of Jesus. I think you can tell an awfully lot about someone when you start talking about what they're well pleased with. And what they do that maybe makes them feel well pleased with themselves. Or what they do that you get an idea that maybe that would make God well pleased with them. Margaret Mead, the great cultural anthropologist, went out and studied cultures around this world. Places like Samoa that were still primitive. And Margaret Mead came back and she said that by biology, human beings are pretty much all alike. That in Samoa or other places in the world that she went that were very much different than the world she lived in the United States, everybody kind of breathed air, everybody kind of ate food, everybody kind of bled red blood. On a biological level, people were pretty much all the same. Nature. But then she led the whole concept, and we learned about this in school, of understanding how different cultures had different impacts on different people in different ways. And therefore people develop different values and different kinds of traditions. That's kind of the middle of my pyramid. And we've experienced that because even the ones of us in this room have come from different backgrounds, different cultures, and have sometimes different values. Nurture. And so we've gone through all of these years trying to determine what's more important, nature or nurture. Nature or nurture. DNA or the way we're raised. On and on and on. People are saying today that whole conversation has been eclipsed. And that whole conversation takes us to a whole next level. That we can talk about nature. I have the coloration of my mother and the build of my father. That's nature. We can talk about nurture. We can talk about all the different ways that our various cultures have affected our lives. But now the conversation has turned to a third level and something very different that people are talking about that transcends the other two. We're talking today about identity. And that we Americans have the opportunity of that probably better than any place on this planet. Because identity is what we choose to do. And that trumps nature. And that trumps nurture. What we choose to be. My college chooses to be a place where people who suddenly don't have a door to go through in their curriculums and their lives have a door. My college chooses not just to take in an extra student that they can count on their rollers, but wants to make those students feel like they're family. My college baseball team chooses, yes, to win games, even to do amazingly well in the classroom for athletes, but to take a little boy dying of cancer and give him the opportunity to make himself feel special in ways that will go with him for the rest of his life, and that they will always remember. My college has an identity. It has a coach that wins a character award. That baseball team has an identity. And you can tell what your identity is, but what you're proud of, what's well-pleasing to you. And maybe by the way that you live your life in a way that you think might in fact be well-pleasing to God. That's what makes us champions at the end of the day. That's what makes us successful in our endeavors. That's what makes us people like Jesus. When we make choices that shape our identity and that take us to places of uniqueness and power that transcend the normal day-to-day things we do, or that transcend just what we know. May God help us that we might make choices and shape identities in ways that He would be well pleased with us. Let's pray. Help us to examine ourselves, Lord, by asking what it is that we're proud of, that we're well pleased about. We're thankful that we can have families and grandchildren and all kinds of things with our kids that we're well pleased about. We're thankful that we can do things in our lives, from the things that we create with our hands to the things that we do with our intelligence that can make us feel well pleased about ourselves. We pray that this class might feel well pleased about the way that it reaches out to people in need and reaches out to people in times of hurt. We're thankful, our Father, that we can even have schools with the name Methodist on them that can look to issues of character, that can look to issues of helping others as prime ways of defining themselves. Bless us and help us to be more like your Son, for we ask in His name. Amen. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for visiting with us. Hope you'll come back again sometime.